All right, welcome to our podcast, Stories from Here to Everywhere, a podcast where we explore stories from here to everywhere, connecting communities, classrooms, and cultures through the community-based global learning collaborative. We're your hosts. I'm Mac Benavides,
And I'm Dennis McCunney.
and we're excited to be here today. Dennis, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, super excited to kick off this podcast. Like I mentioned, I'm Dennis McCunney. Work currently at East Carolina University doing a number of different things: leadership development, community-based global learning, student success programs. But been involved with the collaborative probably for the better part of 6, 7 years now on the steering committee, a bunch of committees, conferences, things like that. So it's been really inspirational for me to see a lot of the work that's happening around the field and to see all the intersections happening. So excited to be part of this conversation.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm Mac Benavides. I work at Kansas State University in leadership education and leadership communication. So, really oriented towards leading change. A lot of the work I do in terms of community-based global learning is situated within Guatemala. And I work with some colleagues there who do locally driven community development efforts. So lots of exciting opportunities for us to think about how we build relationships and sustain those over time and in across space. So excited
Awesome.
to be part of the community-based global learning collaborative. Been involved for about 4 or 5 years now, and lots of uh, just lots of really great resources and people that I'm excited to work with.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, maybe we could talk a little bit, Mac, about um, how this came to be, this idea, and then we can get a little bit more into what the collaborative is all about. For our newer folks, newer listeners, or people who aren't familiar with the collaborative, and then we can talk a little bit more about our plan and what's on the horizon. Sound good?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think this idea of one, stories from here to everywhere, I think really focuses on the interconnections between local, regional, and global. Both of us have experience doing work where we are being bridge builders, boundary spanners, and so finding ways that all of these different types of communities that we might work with. That are right here in our backyard to within our general area to across the world. There's a lot more connections and a lot more opportunity for us to come together in our shared humanity. And I think that that's a big part, for me at least, of this title, Stories from Here to Everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like to remind my students of that, and oftentimes when they return from a community-based global learning experience, they are their eyes are wide open from the experience of being just exposed to our larger world and how small their worlds really were before they participated in it. So it's great to see those those fresh eyes come back from the experience too. I think another thing that we want to explore with this new venture is um, to kind of take a look at, and I think our theme really speaks to this, steers from here to everywhere. Take a look at how the collaborative brings together a bunch of different professionals, right? A bunch of different types of practitioners from a variety of fields and functional areas, which I find really invigorating. You have people who work in education abroad, you have people who work in international development, you have people who are community organizers, people who do participatory research, um, people who are experiential educators, so and more, right? So this bringing together of a variety of different fields and functional areas is, I think, a really interesting and inspiring hallmark of the collaborative, and it doesn't really fit into traditional professional association categories, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I also really value. In my work with students, one of the things that we often think about, especially within this idea of like systems leadership or adaptive leadership, is there's a need to bring as many different perspectives and voices to the table as possible, as we're making sense of complex challenges that are affecting our communities. And again, those interconnected communities across scale. So the opportunity to engage with peers and colleagues across, like you said, different functional areas, different fields, that brings in new insights that advances the way that I make sense of my work, as well as again like the community members, not seeing them fully as distinct and that they need their own space, but recognizing that this collaborative is also involving people who are doing that hands-on work in the field that we are partnering with. So that focus on bringing in together many different voices from community leaders, like you said, researchers, practitioners, university leaders, and students as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think, in thinking about my history, what you mentioned remind me of just one thing that I I really took note of and thought was was really impressive when I started getting involved with the collaborative. It's formerly known as globalsl.org, right? And then eventually evolved into what we know as the collaborative or the community-based global learning collaborative. A real intentional effort by some of our action teams to make sure that community members at all levels were able to participate. It's not just catering to university faculty or administrators who might have different sets of resources to be able to become a member or participate. And so of all the professional associations I've been a part of, this has really been one that's tried to be careful and intentional and thoughtful about creating that community and making sure that community leaders can participate. And so now we have action teams that are populated by yeah, by all sorts of community organizing leaders, community leaders, um, who are doing some incredible work and are able to contribute and sit at the same tables together with people from all different professional backgrounds. So I found that to be particularly inspiring with this work, and and it's not easy to do, right? It's I think um, especially folks who are in the field day to day, that to find time to kind of take a step back, to build community, to be part of a network, and to reflect on the work that you're doing, um, and to interrogate that work can be challenging, right? So we've tried to create space for those folks to participate fully.
Yeah. And it's important. I think that there's a level of accountability that comes in there as well. When we're in the room with all of these different involved parties, right? We've got the community leaders, we've got the university and college representatives, the students, faculty, staff, administrators, and we've also got people that are kind of in the in between. I think a lot of us are in the in between, but because of that, we can't just have those siloed conversations about these are all of the constraints, these are all the priorities, the reasons that it's difficult to do that work. But instead, we have to be able to think about, well, how could we get creative about overcoming some of the barriers? What
Mhm.
might be some obstacles that are self-imposed? That still feel real, that still have a real impact. But one of the things that I've always appreciated about the collaborative is that there's this level of accountability for holding myself to doing what I say I value doing. So producing scholarship that pushes the bounds of what's conventionally acceptable, and whose voices are censored within that scholarship as well. And that's something that the collaborative really emphasizes and really values.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love how you say that. Holding yourself accountable for doing the work that you say that you're about, right?
Mhm.
And pushing the boundaries, and obviously those boundaries function. They're very real
Mhm.
boundaries, whether it's institutions or communities or systems of power. But but at the same time, they're also artificial, right? When you think
Mhm.
about the broader human community trying to promote just basic human flourishing, right? Basic community health. And so I think hopefully our this association really tries to uphold that and keep that kind of their eyes on the prize or our eyes on the prize, so to speak. Um, I was just a part of a conversation with another professional association. It was kind of a connect and collaborate kind of webinar for members to come together. And one of the guiding questions of that recent meeting was it's for the Society for Experiential Education is how do we both uphold student success outcomes um, as well as community engagement outcomes and make sure that we're not losing the intrinsic value of the partnerships that we have in community engagement and not simply seeing all these experiences as serving career outcomes, right, or
Mhm.
helping students to to be ultimately successful in their careers and their career paths, right? But what about the intrinsic value, the 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 yeah, the intrinsic value of those partnerships, and that community is a co-educator of our students. Um,
Mhm.
and so we don't want it to be kind of like a tail wags the dog type situation where worst case scenario, right? And I think sometimes certainly our service learning activities get caught up in this where it's all about the student and what the student is gaining, right? And not
Mhm.
so much about sort of the long-term partnerships, the long-term community health goals.
Mhm.
And so hopefully this collaborative really tries to, like you say, hold us accountable to the deep value of those relationships
Mhm.
at the foundation, and then asking questions of where do we go from there.
Yeah, I think uh, one of my colleagues once told me, and I think this is probably one of the statements that's just really held strong with me over time has been instead of focusing so much on do no harm, what would our practice look like if we shifted to do good? To add
Yeah,
value.
nice,
And
nice.
so I think that even just the name, the collaborative, right? It kind of invokes that ethos as well. So, but maybe it'd be helpful also for us to share a little bit about what is the collaborative for people that y'all are hearing from us. We're big fans. We've enjoyed our experience. We found value in it. So what is the collaborative? It started in 2010, and it used to be called, as you mentioned, the Global Service Learning,
Mhm,
and now kind of shifting the vocabulary towards community-based global learning, and for shorthand, we call it the collaborative, and it has
mhm.
provided that home for scholars and community-based educators who see that an opportunity for higher education. This opportunity to fulfill a kind of an unfulfilled promise to work towards reciprocal partnerships with communities, again, locally, regionally, and around the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that unfulfilled promise is really key, right? Because like I said earlier, we've got this focus on the future and what could we be to continue to do good and what would that look like if we continue to challenge ourselves to work across boundaries. We're also, a membership driven network, whether that's institutional members or individual members. And so, that's, an important feature that helps to drive the collaborative and continue to provide opportunities. But it's a mix of educational institutions and community organizations, primarily, all who are contributing in a variety of different ways, and a lot of individual members actually uh, may not, pay a membership fee, but through their work on an action team, are able to join as full members, which I think is a cool feature, and
Mhm.
pretty accessible.
Yeah. And there's a lot of opportunities for virtual engagement, which I think is always a really helpful way to connect our own community partners that we work with, right, to an organization like the collaborative. It's difficult when we're just going to in-person conferences that may not be cost effective for partners to community partners to be able to attend. But there's real tangible things that they can engage with through the collaborative, and the work in the collaborative is guided by fair trade learning, principles and values that you mentioned earlier. Power dynamics, it really understands, makes sense of, and disrupts and tries to equalize those power dynamics in these types of partnerships between the academy and the community.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, there's some great, if you're new to fair trade learning as a concept, there's some great videos and as well as, open access articles, both popular and more scholarly about fair trade learning. So I'd encourage folks to take a look at those. I'm actually headed to Jamaica in a couple weeks with our partners in Westmoreland, Jamaica, who really pride themselves on trying to practice fair trade learning values. And if you look at their history, even too, just if I could just
Mhm.
share briefly, like they, you know, we're hosting students on these service learning experiences and found that, students were either simply counting service hours, right, or
Mhm.
wanting to quote give back. All okay on the surface,
Mhm.
but we're really only focused on, I think, some of like the more touristy parts of Jamaica. And
Mhm.
so they were starting to, I think, lose lose focus a little bit in their
Mhm.
educational program. And so they took a pause and they said, this community partner said, we're going to kind of reevaluate our guiding principles here and how we host international student visitors and make sure
Mhm.
we set up some standards for what we want these partnerships to look like. And some of those fair trade learning principles kind of came out of that community reflection, which is pretty cool, right? So it wasn't necessarily a bunch of academics thinking through, fair trade learning theory, although that helped a little bit too, but to
Mhm.
kind of disseminate the work. But it really kind of came out of um, community-based organizations and NGOs thinking about how they want to do their work as authentically and as true to their foundational values as possible.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really great illustration of, the philosophy of the collaborative to center voices of practitioners and scholars who are focused on this ethical global engagement. So not just the people coming from higher education or the people that are coming from like that research perspective, but also the people who are coming from that practice or community leadership background as well, and thinking about how do we co-create these values in this community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that co-creation I think is really kind of a key word and a key theme here. And it really sort of speaks to the title of our podcast too. Maybe we can get into a little bit about, our purpose for this podcast
Mhm.
and how we came to formulate it. I think maybe what was it? um, Late fall, early winter, we were talking a
Mhm.
little bit more, and one of our action teams was a knowledge mobilization action team about how to continue to share this work using the resources that we have, the somewhat limited resources that we have, right?
Right.
Um, and so we said, well, perhaps we could offer a podcast, and Mac and I, we consider ourselves to be evolving podcast professionals, right? um, so we're learning as we go, but we thought through, what would it look like to you know create a space where we could share some of the basic work that's happening, but also share some of the lived experience of the key people who are part of the collaborative, so community members, academic leaders or higher ed leaders, students as well, like we mentioned. So, so this kind of podcast came to be and we're excited to move it forward. But we do have a plan, and we're also open to feedback from listeners all along the way.
Yeah, I feel like my standard go-to plan is to balance, stumble along, figure it out as we go with there's some general idea of like the direction that we're going. So
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely, we could put together, the list of episodes, but getting in feedback and recommendations from the field is in line with, the purpose and the desire that we have. The podcast also specifically came out of the action team that we're on, the knowledge mobilization. So how do we make sure that we are mobilizing the knowledge that is generated through the collaborative's network? So we want to partner with other resources that the collaborative offers, like the Fair Trade Learning Toolkit, the blog series, the variety of resources that we have, and extend into our broader networks as well. To be able to consider how do we amplify voices? How do we explore stories that can really help inform that ethical global engagement practice and research.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I see it as like anytime we are engaging with or consuming information, having like multiple ways of consuming that information, whether it's through listening to stories, whether it's through reading a research project, whether it's through reading a white paper or an assessment report, all those things I think can help give us a more holistic picture of this work that we call community-based global learning. And
Mhm.
but I think though most particularly and importantly, we're going to try to center the stories of people who are living it, who are who are trying to make it work, right? Who are learning through failure, and I think those stories are really invaluable. So to actually hear them, I think is going to be really exciting for us to be able to share.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what's on the horizon for us?
Yeah, yeah. So our plan then is we're hoping to offer and host two podcasts a month, and we've got a number of topics that we'll be trying to tackle. Um, so each month will be a brief kind of conversation with Mac and I. Probably about 30 minutes, no more, just trying to kind of frame a particular issue. And then we'll also, on the off weeks, be hosting a guest to have some conversation with them, whether it's a practitioner in the field or a researcher or a student. And we've got all sorts of topics that we think that our listeners will want to hear about. But again, we really want to hear your feedback. Things like how do you do effective assessment of this work? How do you build and sustain, really meaningful democratic partnerships between all sorts of organizations, whether it's universities or communities, student organizations, communities, et cetera, community organizations. Um, we also want to kind of talk about like, how do we build in opportunities for reflective practitioners, and what does that actually look like? Some of those experiential learning tools that have been tried and true. I know some organizations, like All People Be Happy, and others are diving into using AI tools, maybe controversial or not, depending on your perspective, but it's certainly something that people are using to lead reflection with students, and to help students think about the lessons they're learning, and the questions that still remain for them after their CBGL experiences. So all sorts of topics that's just kind of scratching the surface. But we also want to profile, lest I forget, some researchers like Mac and your colleagues. But we have lots of really impressive and engaged researchers, thoughtful researchers, who are trying to disseminate some of the knowledge that they generate, and some of the findings that they're talking about. So that will be an important part of our set of offerings for the next few months.
We are also looking to explore opportunities to maybe do some of the episodes in the field, and having some live episodes
Yes.
happen with some guests, maybe a little bit more organically. And so we'll definitely keep you all tuned in on the plan there as well. Opportunities for you
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
to contribute.
Yeah, for sure. I guess we have to get a USB mic for that sort of thing, right? And um, you know, and actually walk the walk, look the part, I should say. So we'll get there. We'll get there. But I'm excited about the opportunities. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anything else you want to talk more about, Mac, in this intro conversation? Anything that we've left on the table?
Not that I can think of at this moment. I'm excited to. I think in our next episode, we're gonna actually have some of the people from the collaborative come in and just share a little bit more about the organization and opportunities to get connected. But and looking forward to the subsequent episodes that come from there.
That's great. That's great. Same here. Same here. Um, well, that's it then for this episode of From Here to Everywhere, our inaugural kickoff episode. We really appreciate you listening and tuning in. Just want to remind you to make sure that you check out the Collaborative's website to read our newest blog posts, learn more about fair trade learning, and to stay connected. So, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.